For years, it was dismissed as nothing more than a quiet royal curiosity, a fleeting moment during a private viewing of the crown's most treasured jewels. But according to a former royal curator, there was one extraordinary piece that captured Catherine's attention unlike any other. She never asked for it. She never campaigned to wear it, yet behind palace walls, whispers persisted that the Queen had made a deliberate decision regarding its future, one that remained secret until now. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The British royal family has always been surrounded by stories of crowns, tiaras, diamonds, and priceless heirlooms, but those who have spent years studying the monarchy understand a deeper truth. The most fascinating treasures are often not the ones displayed at state banquets or diplomatic receptions. Instead, they are the pieces hidden away from public view, protected by tradition, guarded by Sicily, and known only to a select circle of trusted insiders. According to recent claims attributed to a former royal curator, one such jewel may have carried a significance far greater than anyone outside palace walls ever realized. What makes this story so unusual is not the jewel itself, but the reaction it allegedly inspired. Catherine, now Princess of Wales, has long earned a reputation for respecting royal protocol. Unlike many who entered the institution before her, she was never associated with demands, disputes, or public struggles over status and privilege. Palace observers frequently described her as patient, careful, and remarkably aware of the responsibilities attached to every symbol of royal history. That is why reports of her admiration for a little-known piece within the royal collection immediately caught the attention of those familiar with the inner workings of the crown. The curator's account suggests that during a private review of historical royal treasures, Catherine spent considerable time discussing one specific jewel. It was not the largest piece, it was not the most valuable by modern standards. Yet something about its history seemed to resonate with her. Questions were reportedly asked, stories were exchanged. The discussion lingered longer than many expected. And while nothing dramatic appeared to happen in that moment, palace insiders would later remember it as the beginning of a mystery that refused to disappear. What followed only deepened the intrigue. The jewel remained locked away. Years passed without any public appearance. State occasions came and went. Historic exhibitions were organized. New generations of royal watchers scrutinized every tiara, brooch, and necklace worn by senior royals. Yet this particular treasure remained absent. No explanation was offered. No official statement was made. The silence itself became part of the story. Then came the revelation that reignited interest across royal circles. As previously sealed archive material began attracting renewed attention, questions resurfaced about Queen Elizabeth's personal decisions regarding certain heirlooms. Why had some pieces been released while others remained hidden? And why had this particular jewel, despite attracting Catherine's admiration, never been allowed back into public royal life? The answers, according to those closest to the collection, may stretch far beyond simple matters of fashion or preference. They may reach into questions of legacy, symbolism, and a royal plan that remained unfinished for decades. But understanding why the jewel remained hidden requires going back to its remarkable history and the powerful women who wore it before Catherine ever saw it. Long before Catherine entered the royal family, the jewel had already become the subject of fascination among historians, curators, and members of the royal household. Unlike the famous tiaras regularly displayed at state banquets, this piece remained buried deep within the royal collection. Appearing only in old photographs and fading inventory records, its absence raised questions. Why preserve something so magnificent only to keep it forever out of sight? The deeper researchers looked into the story, the stranger it became. Most royal jewels have a clear path through history. They appear at coronations, weddings, jubilees, and state occasions. Their journeys are documented, their wearers remembered, and their significance explained through generations of royal tradition. But this jewel seemed to follow a completely different path. It surfaced briefly in historical records before disappearing again, almost as though an invisible hand had quietly removed it from the public narrative. The result was decades of speculation that transformed a beautiful piece of jewelry into one of the most intriguing mysteries within the royal collection. According to accounts preserved by royal historians, The jewel's origins stretched back through multiple generations of royal women. It was said to have passed through the hands of queens, princesses, and consorts, who each carried the burden of representing the monarchy during periods of enormous change. Unlike many treasures valued primarily for their gemstones or craftsmanship, this piece developed a reputation because of the stories attached to it. Every transfer from one generation to another seemed to add another layer of meaning. Over time, it became associated not simply with status, but with duty, resilience, and the ability to endure extraordinary pressures while serving the crown. That legacy only intensified the fascination surrounding its disappearance. Historians discovered occasional references hidden within archive documents. Curators reportedly encountered old inventory notes describing the piece with unusual reverence. Even among experts familiar with thousands of royal artifacts, the jewel carried a unique reputation. Some reportedly described it as one of the most distinctive items ever held within the collection, not because it was the most expensive, but because it represented something far more difficult to measure. It symbolized continuity, it connected generations, and perhaps most importantly, it seemed to embody a chapter of royal history that certain individuals were determined to preserve. As years turned into decades, the mystery deepened rather than faded. Rare historic portraits occasionally reminded observers that the jewel still existed somewhere beyond public reach. Each appearance sparked fresh debate. Why had it vanished? Why was it never loaned for exhibitions? Why did successive generations of senior royals seemingly avoid discussing it altogether? The lack of answers only fueled further curiosity. What had begun as a simple question about a forgotten heirloom slowly evolved into something much larger, a puzzle involving tradition, legacy, and decisions made at the highest levels of the monarchy. Behind closed doors, however, the jewel was never truly forgotten. Curators reportedly continued treating it with exceptional care. Archive specialists preserved every reference connected to its history. And among those entrusted with safeguarding royal treasures, there remained a quiet understanding that this particular piece occupied a category all its own. It was not merely being protected, it was being preserved for reasons that few fully understood. That uncertainty lingered for years, surviving changes in generations, leadership, and public attention. Yet hidden beneath the silence was a question waiting for the right person to ask. It, the mystery, had endured through countless royal chapters, but everything began to shift when Catherine entered the institution. Because once she encountered the collection herself, a story that had remained dormant for decades suddenly found new life, and with it came revelations that would leave palace observers questioning everything they thought they knew. And when Catherine was finally introduced to the collection, one particular moment reportedly changed the conversations surrounding the jewel forever. Those familiar with royal preparations say Catherine approached every historical artifact with genuine curiosity rather than entitlement. Yet during one private viewing, witnesses allegedly noticed her lingering longer than expected before a single display case. She asked questions. She listened carefully, and according to later accounts, her admiration for the jewel was impossible to miss, even though she never expressed any desire to claim it for herself. By the time this private viewing reportedly took place, Catherine had already earned a reputation that distinguished her from many who entered the royal spotlight. Palace staff, historians, and royal observers frequently described her approach as thoughtful and measured. She understood that every object within the royal collection carried a story far older than any individual who temporarily became its custodian. For Catherine, royal treasures were not symbols of privilege. They were pieces of history, each connected to generations of sacrifice, responsibility, and service. That perspective would become especially important on the day she was introduced to one of the collection's most closely guarded mysteries. According to accounts later attributed to individuals familiar with the visit, palace staff arranged a private review of several historic pieces connected to the monarchy's past. Such viewings were not unusual for senior members of the royal family, particularly those expected to carry important ceremonial responsibilities in the future. Yet what happened during this particular occasion reportedly stood out in the minds of those present. While other treasures received polite attention, one jewel appeared to command Catherine's focus in a completely different way. The fascination was never described as excitement or ambition. Instead, those who later recalled the moment spoke about something far more subtle. Catherine reportedly became deeply interested in the history surrounding the piece. She wanted to understand where it came from, who had worn it, and why it had seemingly vanished from public life. Questions led to more questions. Stories uncovered older stories. The deeper the discussion went, the more unusual the jewel seemed to become. It was as if every answer revealed another layer of mystery beneath it. What reportedly impressed staff most was what did not happen. At no point did Catherine allegedly suggest that she wished to wear the jewel. There were no discussions about inheritance, no requests were made, no expectations were expressed. In an institution where every action can become the subject of speculation, that restraint did not go unnoticed. If anything, it strengthened the curiosity of those observing the exchange. Why would someone show such genuine interest in a piece while asking for absolutely nothing in return? The former curator's recollections would later add another intriguing dimension to the story. According to accounts circulating within royal circles, Catherine seemed captivated not by the jewel's value, but by what it represented. The piece appeared to embody the experiences of the women who had carried royal duties across different eras, their triumphs, their burdens, their resilience. It was history concentrated into a single object, and Catherine reportedly understood that better than most. Before long, quiet conversations began spreading among palace insiders. Nothing dramatic, nothing official, just whispers. Some wondered whether the jewel might eventually return to public life. Others questioned whether Catherine's interest had drawn attention to an heirloom long forgotten by the wider world. What had started as a routine review of royal artifacts was gradually transforming into something much larger. The mystery surrounding the jewel was no longer fading with time, it was growing. And as those whispers continued circulating through royal corridors, another detail emerged that made the entire situation even more remarkable. Because while Catherine's reactions sparked curiosity among those around her, there was someone else whose response carried far greater significance. The person with ultimate authority over the jewel remained completely silent, yet according to those familiar with the matter, that silence may have revealed more than words ever could. What made the situation even more intriguing was the reaction of Queen Elizabeth herself. If Catherine's admiration was quietly noted, the Queen's response was even more remarkable. Rather than introducing the jewel into public royal life, Elizabeth reportedly maintained the restrictions that had surrounded it for years. No public appearance followed, no official photographs emerged. The treasure remained exactly where it had been secured, protected, and seemingly reserved for a purpose known only to the monarch herself. For many observers within royal circles, that decision only intensified the mystery. Queen Elizabeth had spent decades overseeing one of the most significant collections of royal heirlooms in the world. She understood better than anyone the power attached to every crown, necklace, brooch, and tiara under her care. Nothing was accidental. Every appearance carried meaning, every absence carried meaning as well. That is why reports that the jewel remained locked away, even after Catherine's well-known interest in its history, immediately fueled speculation that something far more significant was unfolding behind palace walls. Throughout her reign, Elizabeth developed a reputation for patience and extraordinary caution when it came to matters of royal legacy. She often thought not in years but in generations. Decisions involving family treasures were rarely made to satisfy temporary public interest. Instead, they reflected long-term plans designed to protect the institution itself. Those who worked closely with royal collections frequently noted that the Queen viewed certain heirlooms as more than decorative objects. They were symbols of continuity, responsibility, and sacrifice. Once viewed through that lens, the continued absence of the jewel became even more difficult to explain. According to accounts that later circulated among historians and former staff members, several curators were reportedly surprised by the decision. Catherine had demonstrated genuine appreciation for the jewel's story. Public fascination surrounding royal heritage continued to grow. The conditions appeared ideal for reintroducing the piece to royal life. Yet nothing changed. The treasure remained hidden, its silence becoming almost as famous as its history. Every year that passed without its return seemed to add another layer to the mystery. Some royal experts began drawing comparisons to other protected heirlooms that had remained unavailable for decades before eventually reappearing under extraordinary circumstances. History offered several examples of treasures deliberately withheld until the monarchy believed the timing was right. In those cases, the delay often transformed an object into something larger than itself. What started as jewelry became legacy. What began as an heirloom became a statement, and increasingly, observers wondered whether the same logic applied here. The questions multiplied. Was the Queen preserving the jewel for a future generation? Had she attached special conditions to its eventual use? Or had she simply concluded that its historical significance outweighed any benefit gained from displaying it publicly? No definitive answers emerged. Instead, whispers spread through royal circles, each theory more intriguing than the last. The absence of information created a vacuum that speculation eagerly filled. Meanwhile, Catherine continued fulfilling her growing responsibilities within the monarchy. Her popularity increased, her position strengthened, her understanding of royal tradition deepened, yet despite all these changes, the jewel remained untouched. It was as if an invisible line had been drawn around it, one that even the most senior members of the family could not cross. The contrast was impossible to ignore. As Catherine's influence expanded, the treasure she had once admired remained frozen in time. That unusual balance between growing public curiosity and unwavering royal silence gradually transformed the jewel into something far more than a forgotten heirloom. It became a symbol of an unanswered question, a secret protected by a monarch renowned for guarding the institution's deepest traditions. And as the years continued to pass, those unanswered questions became impossible to dismiss. They lingered in conversations, resurfaced in archive discussions, and eventually found their way to individuals who stood closest to the monarchy's future. As years passed, the unanswered questions only grew louder and eventually reached the ears of those closest to the future of the monarchy. Royal households thrive on protocol, but they also thrive on whispers. As Catherine's role within the monarchy expanded, speculation surrounding the hidden jewel intensified. Some believed it was being preserved for a future queen. Others argued that the Queen considered it too historically significant to enter regular circulation. With every major royal event, observers wondered whether this would finally be the occasion that brought the mysterious treasure back into the spotlight. The longer the jewel remained hidden, the more powerful its legend became. What had once been a little-known royal heirloom slowly transformed into one of the most discussed mysteries among royal historians and devoted followers of the monarchy. Catherine's growing prominence only fueled the fascination. As she stepped into increasingly important roles and earned widespread respect for her commitment to royal duty, many began to wonder whether the jewel's future was somehow connected to her own. Every state occasion, every significant ceremony, and every major royal milestone reignited the same question. Was this finally the moment the hidden treasure would emerge? Yet year after year, the answer remained unchanged. The jewel stayed out of public view, and that silence encouraged countless theories. Some believed Queen Elizabeth had intended it for a future generation. Others suggested it carried a deeper symbolic meaning that made it unsuitable for ordinary public appearances. Historians debated its significance, royal commentators revisited old archive references, and interest quietly grew beyond palace circles. The mystery was no longer just about a piece of jewelry. It had become a story about legacy, tradition, and a decision that seemed to defy explanation. Then came the revelation that changed everything. After years of silence, the former curator reportedly shared details that reshaped the entire story. According to this account, the issue had never been about Catherine's suitability, popularity, or position within the royal family. The jewel represented something much larger than ownership. It symbolized continuity, sacrifice, and an unbroken chain of royal duty stretching across generations. Suddenly, the mystery looked very different. What many had interpreted as exclusion could instead have been preservation. The curator's explanation shifted attention away from who might eventually wear the jewel and toward why it mattered in the first place. Queen Elizabeth's decision was viewed through an entirely new lens. Rather than withholding the treasure, she may have been protecting its meaning. Catherine's admiration reportedly strengthened that belief rather than weakening it. According to those familiar with the story, the Princess of Wales understood the jewel's historical importance in a way that reflected the very values it represented. In that sense, her interest may have reinforced the Queen's determination to preserve it. For the first time, the public narrative changed. The conversation was no longer centered on inheritance or access. It became a reflection on royal tradition itself and the difficult choices required to safeguard it. But while the curator's account answered many questions, it also created one final mystery. If the jewel had been protected for decades to preserve its deeper significance, then what happens next? Has its purpose already been fulfilled, or is its most important chapter still waiting to be written? Yet the curator's comments also raised one final question: what happens to the jewel now? Today, the jewel remains one of the most fascinating mysteries within the royal collection. Catherine's journey from admired newcomer to Princess of Wales has transformed the context surrounding the piece. What once seemed like a forgotten treasure now appears tied to the monarchy's future. Whether by design or destiny, the story of the jewel has become inseparable from the story of Catherine herself. As the years have passed, the conversation surrounding the hidden heirloom has evolved into something far greater than a discussion about jewelry. It has become a reflection of Catherine's own remarkable rise within the royal family. When she first entered royal life, she was viewed as an outsider learning the traditions of one of the world's most scrutinized institutions. Today, she stands at the very heart of that institution, carrying responsibilities that continue to expand with every passing year. In many ways, the story of the jewel seems to mirror that transformation. Both have grown in significance. Both have become symbols of continuity, and both now occupy a unique place within discussions about the monarchy's future. Public fascination has only intensified. What was once known primarily among historians and royal insiders has become part of a much larger conversation about heritage, duty, and legacy. The former curator's revelations encouraged many people to reconsider the Queen's decision and the deeper meaning behind it. Rather than seeing the jewel as a hidden treasure waiting to be displayed, many began viewing it as a symbol deliberately preserved for reasons that extend beyond public appearances. The mystery itself became part of its value. Yet the former curator's revelation did not solve every question. If anything, it deepened them. The jewel remains hidden, its future unwritten, its purpose still debated behind palace doors. One fact, however, continues to stand above all others. Long before the public became aware of the story, Catherine reportedly recognized that this was no ordinary royal heirloom. Her interest was never linked to ownership or status. It was rooted in an appreciation of the history, sacrifice, and tradition attached to it. That detail has become increasingly important as people search for clues about what may eventually happen next. Some believe future generations of the monarchy may revisit the decision. Others argue that the Queen's intentions should remain untouched. The debate continues because there are no definitive answers, only possibilities. And perhaps that uncertainty is precisely what keeps the story alive. The jewel has become more than a physical object. It represents the enduring relationship between the past and the future, between personal admiration and institutional responsibility, between what is revealed and what remains protected. In the end, the greatest mystery may not be where the jewel is or who might eventually wear it. The real mystery is why its story continues to resonate so powerfully decades after it disappeared from public life. Perhaps it is because people recognize something timeless within it. A reminder that legacy is not measured by visibility alone. Sometimes the most important symbols are the ones carefully preserved, waiting for history to decide their next chapter. Because in the House of Windsor, some treasures are valuable, not because they are worn, but because they are patiently waiting for the right moment in history. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.